Okay, good morning everybody. My name is Sebastian Paddington from TNT Aquatics, and I'm joined by guest Mr. Christopher George. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Sebastian.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. You know, it's a really sunny Saturday morning.
Chris has had a very interesting story. He's still young, but he's had quite an interesting story, both professionally, personally, sporting-wise. So we're going to touch on a lot of different areas of his life, which I think would be a story needs to be told. And I want to touch first, Chris, on your sporting history. So tell me about sport. How did you get into sport? And then we're going to start touching on all the various sports. But what were the first sports you got into, and how did you get into sports? And why did you get into sports?
So I think the first sport that I got into was swimming, and the reason why I got into the sport of swimming was because my mother could not swim when she was younger. My father struggled with swimming, so they thought that swimming was a sport that could kind of really ground you as an athlete. So I started swimming at the Flying Fish Swim Club in 1989, a long time ago, at the age of 5 or 6. And that was my first foray into sport. Subsequent to that, I was a swimming athlete all the way until I went to university in 2002. But along the way, I picked up other sports. So just like every other kid, I think in Trinidad, boy, I played football. I did a little bit of gymnastics along the way, but all those things kind of supplemented my swimming journey until I fell in love with the sport of water polo in around 1999 or 2000, a few years before I went to university. And then in 2002, I went to university, and then I kind of transitioned into playing water polo as my primary sport there. So that's how it is I started, along the way.
So let's talk about swimming a little bit. So what has swimming taught you, and how far did you go into swimming? I know you mentioned college, but were you national level, regional level? Talk a bit about swimming and what swimming has taught you, and also more importantly, let me know about why you said you fell in love with water polo, because that you fell out of love with swimming. I'm just trying to understand the swimming story a bit, and then the transition to water polo. It's very interesting to understand that.
Yeah, so swimming taught me tenacity. I think that one of the greatest things that you get from being in the pool is that time period, for 2, 3, 4 hours a day. All swimmers will know this, where we're swimming up and down, and it's you against your mind. It's you against every single meter. Every swimmer has this story of swimming 10,000 meters a day, and up and down the pool, trying to erode away the things that will make you slower and also getting stronger, depending on the event that you do. So that's the primary thing about swimming. Now, when I was in my first national team at age 9 or 10, actually you were on that team in 1994, Jamaica. And so that was my first foray into the sport of swimming. So I was a national athlete from age 9 in swimming. I then went to several games, Caribbean Island Swimming Championships, CC Can, and I think in 2002 was the last, actually 2004 was the last time that I represented Trinidad and Tobago in the sport of swimming. And the biggest thing for me was I recognized it was a tier system. I think I could have competed at college, maybe at a D2 school in swimming, but that was not the avenue that I thought I would have achieved the most, and so it was not a specific falling out of love with swimming, but I kind of fell in love with something else, water polo. And I think that the swimming base really assisted me in transitioning or becoming very competitive in the sport of water polo, even though it was a fledgling sport here in Trinidad and Tobago. So that was a little bit of transition. So I think my last real event was the Caribbean Island Swimming Championship in 2004, but where I was actually a second year student in university, and I kind of used swimming, my last national event, to prepare for a water polo season, because I wasn't able to go as an athlete for the water polo tournament in 2004. So that was kind of a piece of my puzzle of my transition from swimming into water polo.
Very interesting, because a lot of people, use sport as an avenue to get out of, not get out, to I guess to explore opportunities in other countries for university education, and it's an interesting point, that you may not be the best swimmer, but you got a better opportunity in water polo to go to a better school to help your professional career and your professional endeavors. So I guess it could be for other sports, may not be the best football player, so maybe try another sport. That was interesting. So how did you get that? Did you get a scholarship? So how did you know get into the school that you wanted, which would give you good balance?
So I actually, when I applied to my dad had this list in 2001 into 2002 when I was applying to schools. I applied to 4 schools: University of Florida, Georgia Institute of Technology, Tulane University, and North Carolina Chapel Hill. Each one of them had reasonable swimming programs, and but the core thing for me was I was in agreement with my father that he wanted me to go to the best school for engineering. And one of the things, or the concessions that I got, was I needed to have a school that had a reasonable water polo program, and we settled on those 4 institutions. I did get scholarship offers to Tulane University and consideration for financial aid to University of Florida, but Georgia Tech, for all the things that I wanted to do, I think fit the bill. So when I went to Georgia Tech, I started playing under the CWPA, which is a federation for water polo, and I played in the Southeast Conference. I played at Georgia Tech, where I became a 4-time All-American and SEC Player of the Year, at least in one occasion, I think in 2004. So I was able to kind of fulfill my academic aspirations, which at that time was becoming a chemical engineer. So I did that until 2006, and I was also able to do water polo, which is a sport that I love, at a reasonably high level in the United States. So that was a real nice transition, and I enjoyed that journey.
So that's one of the challenges that we experience in Trinidad is, you've mentioned your dad gave you guidance, you wanted to get into engineering, you find that there's in your experience, who helped you? Yes, your dad, but were there other avenues as a young person, knowing what you wanted to study, knowing what schools to approach, knowing how to get scholarship advice or assistance? How did you go about that back then? Because things may be better now, but how did that happen? What kind of support did you have, so that young people now who want to explore what careers to do, what sports to do, have these options? And what advice would you give the 2022 and 2023 kids who want to explore the opportunities outside professionally for school as well as in a sport of their choice?
So, I mean, I feel I was quite lucky. I had a father who did tremendous research on exactly what of the type of schools that I would want to go to. So I was lucky in that avail. I also had swimming coaches. I think it was actually a lot of swimming coaches who kind of advised me of exactly what it is I wanted to do. So I remember having conversations with a swimming coach who currently coaches now, Edward Tuberoso, who understood somewhat the framework of the United States and what I needed to develop myself. Because one of the things, obviously, that happened to me, so it's kind of like going back a little bit. I grew up in the era where George Bobel was my contemporary. And I think I kind of recognize, and this is why it is that it was a little bit of a transition from 2002. I had always had in my head that I wanted to go to the Olympics, okay? And I kind of recognized, just understanding the dynamics of swimming, that even if it is I was a regional swimmer who medaled at the Caribbean Island Swimming Championships, etc., that you needed to have this a certain level to progress in a sport to compete at the Pan Ams, to compete at the World Championships, to compete ultimately at my what I think was the mecca of sporting achievement, the Olympics. And I realized at 18 that, hey, what? I reached a certain point in swimming, but a lot of the tools that I had did not naturally make me a better swimmer. But I was strong. I had this ability to dominate inside of the water because I had swam for so many years. And I thought that because of my size, because of my abilities, that I naturally was able to become this good player in water polo. So one of the funny stories was I remember playing in Georgia Tech, and I was in a tournament in California, and I got recognized by this person, and he was like, Christopher, why is it that you're not trying out for the United States national team? Obviously, I'm not an American citizen. So I kind of recognized that I had this ability in water polo. I had actually been given an opportunity to try out for a professional team in Montenegro. So I had that ability in water polo, and I thought, here's the deal. This is something that I really want to get to the next level. I need to have these comparable skills to be able to transcend this particular sport. And even though water polo was something that was young in Trinidad and Tobago, I thought that we had these talented guys just like me who were able to raise the level of the sport and kind of go on to the other stages, the Pan Am Championships, which I thought was a huge thing, you know, the Olympics of our region, and then subsequently to the Olympics, which was a little bit of a pipe dream, I think, for water polo. But I still think that Trinidad has the talent to get there as long as we have a group of athletes who are conscientious.
So young kids now who are looking for, you know, to choose sports and college, what avenues exist right now, or what is lacking right now as a young Trinidad and Tobago person? What's lacking for them to, luckily you are your dad, some
Yes.
kids don't have, you know, those parents that are as involved, or they may not have the coaches that are involved. What is needed?
I think that what is needed is a general awareness. I think that that Trinidadians who are exceedingly talented, they kind of find their way because they are the cream at the top, and they find their way to Canada, they find their way to the United States for some of these opportunities, which may give them the benefit of getting 4 years education and also lengthening the time that they're in a sport so that they can actually achieve their ultimate potential in the sport, you know, which is maybe trying to go to the Olympics, or even so much now getting on the professional circuit for swimming. So the thing is, I think it's primarily awareness. I think that an underused resource in Trinidad and Tobago is the senior athlete, who's maybe between the ages of 35 and 40 or 35 and 45, where we have kind of gone through this transition of being a sportsman from age 8 all the way, and some of us kind of push it to age 30, where we're trying to push against the grain, because there's not, I think, an institutional support system that naturally allows you or tells you, well, there's age group swimming, there's college swimming. How do you transition now into a professional athlete? So therefore, because a lot of us are achieving our athletic potential at your ages 27 or 28. So even if it is you finish university at 22 and you've kind of navigated that and you get into one of these programs, how do I then go from age 22 to 28? You know, and I feel that if an individual just understood that, they can go to any senior athlete, anyone who has kind of gone to university, anyone who has reached, you know, Central American Championships, Pan Am Championships, and just ask a question. You know, so I really credit you with this type of program, because all they need is a name, and I'm confident that any one of us, that any of these young athletes approach, we'll give them time, and that's what you need. You need awareness, because in the end, it's your own vigor that's going to get you to that next place.
And that's the key part of this mentoring series. You know, we have such a wealth of former athletes that are willing to give back, and all of the other countries in the world are benefiting from them more than Trinidad. You know, between, you know, Arturo, what he's doing on NBC, and Shaka with ESPN, and
Yes.
Richard in Florida, and George. But it's just there's so much people willing to give back, and I think the awareness. So I appreciate that, and the goal is to have this mentoring series, just have it streaming, have it out there. So hopefully young people who have opportunity or who have talent know they can reach out to any of us,
Yes.
and we will give of our time freely, and help support them.
Yeah, so I really hold that true.
Sorry.
Yeah, I really hold that as something that's very important. So for me, the biggest thing for me is that anyone who is a younger athlete at any age that's struggling with the transition, they could come and talk to me. And again, the thing that I think a lot of athletes don't recognize is how large the community is, and how much someone may assist you just with the connection. Because, there are all these kind of, these parallel organizations that have the ability to help you in Trinidad and Tobago, but how do you access them? How do you access the Sport Company of Trinidad and Tobago? How do you access the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee? How do you access Ministry of Sport funding? Now again, all these different types of things, all of us have kind of gone through it, of getting some sort of support inside these organizations, and a lot of individuals believe that there is some magic, silver bullet to get funding from there. Sometimes it's just asking a question and persistence. And all of us know that have received funding from the government that have assisted us in our quest to make it to the Olympics, to go on and achieve the ultimate prize in sport, that it was just that. It was a phone call. It was going to these offices. And I think that if an individual was fueled with this information, and then also with a phone number, which a lot of us as athletes have, because we're still in the system in some way, that would obviously aid them and allow them to make that transition.
Very, very, very important, and a very key point. I'm going to open to some questions on the floor before I jump to some next transition. Any questions from the audience?
So you said you make it sound like the athletes themselves have to approach the Olympic Committee and these other organizations.
Yeah.
The organizations themselves, the national governing bodies themselves, like in foreign countries, if you qualify for something, right, they will seek the funding for you. Yeah. Right? I mean, you think there's certain pay levels, like, I mean, I know we're on that level where you just you get this much money for this and coaching for that.
Yeah.
Right? In Trinidad, we don't have that. So you said it sounds like does the national government body have a responsibility as well? To say, hey, you're qualifying for this, and you have another thing, or for our elite athletes, or is that something that the athletes themselves have to do themselves?
So thank you, Patrick, for that question. I think that there are several layers to that, and I now have experience, and I guess it's maybe something where I'm now in the executive of a federation. So I've kind of seen it from the athlete to the elite athlete to the college athlete and also now to the administration of a sport. Now, with respect to the governing bodies, I know that these governing bodies do going and actively seek funding for athletes at large. What is the turning point in a lot of these circumstances is that unfortunately in Trinidad and Tobago, access to funding is based on results. So it's kind of a little bit of a chicken and egg situation, where once it is that you do start getting results, you start gaining momentum and you actually start getting more funding. So we have several examples of that, where, and I'll use myself not to call another individual. Between 2012 and 2014, when I was trying to make the Olympics in the sport of judo, I had some awareness through, because I had people that I knew in the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee, because I had gone through a process with water polo. So I kind of knew at that time the president was Brian Lewis, and I had a conversation with him. And he said, Chris, if it is that you're able to do A, B, C, and D, this is when it is that we'll be able to assist you. So I was in the United Kingdom in 2013. I had no funding whatsoever. And I remember charting out every single tournament in the United Kingdom, which I could have gone to, which was around my, around where it is I was living, because I was living in Scotland. So I went down to England, I competed, etc. Once I started getting results in the United Kingdom, then the National Federation was then able to approach the Olympic Committee to say, here what, Christopher's won 7 tournaments in 2013 into 2014. You have Commonwealth Games in 2014. Let Christopher go. I was then allowed to go to the Commonwealth Games. When I went to the Commonwealth Games, I remember talking to Brian Lewis, and then Brian was like, Chris, I've known you since 2010 at Central American Championships. I know you qualified for Pan Am Games as a water polo athlete. You didn't get to go, but I could see how this can work. You know, you think you can make it to the Olympics in 2016? I told him yes, obviously, because I had the goal in my head. At that point in time, I didn't have any support from any of the organizations, save for the Olympic Committee, which allowed me to go to the Commonwealth Games. And then later on that year, in November, I went through the Olympic Committee to Central American Championships. I won a bronze medal. And then at that point in time, that's when it is I access funding. At that point in time, that's when I access funding for through the Ministry of Sport and through the Sport Company of Trinidad and Tobago. So you see how it's almost as in there is a chicken and egg situation going on, but how you navigate it as an athlete is, I feel that it's grounded in you and how it is that you recognize these different, how these organizations are connected. Now, the reason why I say that you must or you should connect with a senior athlete is what had happened. I understood some of the systems in Trinidad and Tobago, and also I was a mature athlete in 2013, where I was 29 going on 30 years old. So I had been in the sport piece, and I understood where the Ministry of Sport was, where the Sport Company of Trinidad was, and I obviously was able to have a conversation with the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee, you know. So for me, I understand I was in a unique position understanding the sport, and I'd gotten to the age of 29 where I was still at an elite level, still had the desire to try going to the Olympics, but as you recognize, it was me kind of orchestrating these different things. Now, there are different ways to do it, you know, but that was how it is that I did it. And I do recognize that if I had started the sport before at age 19, I wouldn't have been able to have those connections. But there are individuals that have those connections. There's me, there's Sebastian, where we worked with some of these organizations before. We can make a call and get you into having the conversation with the right people to kind of direct you on what way you want to go. So it's still people or individual focus.
So to follow up on what you're just saying, I'm sorry, not to dominate the question. So
yeah.
Is there a formal process, like when you see foreign bodies, you train in Scotland, you train in America, is there a formal process that people go through that versus I know you and they know me and they like me? I mean, which is too Trini. I mean, for me it's very Trini, but I don't know a lot of people.
Yes.
I know some, and I don't want, if I had athletes, I have to go back, it's like begging around the corner who I know. So is that the future then, again, for 10 years from now, 5 years from now, for our athletes, again, they have to know know somebody in that business? Or is there a formal process through the governing bodies or through, like somebody reaches out to them and says, hey, you're promising, this is what we're looking for you now. Come and see, is that, is it like the cart before the horse said, or you have to be chasing that cart?
Yes. So I will speak of a practical example with a young lady who just went to the World Championships for gymnastics. So I'm now involved in the Gymnastics Federation as the president. And what the Gymnastics Federation does, and Annalise is a young lady who's a Trinidadian who lives in New York. We have identified her as a talented athlete. She's just turned 16 years old. And what the Federation has done is they sought funding from Sport Company of Trinidad and Tobago so that she can go to the Pan Am Games, to the World Championships, which she qualified for and competed in Birmingham in November. So the formal process is the federation seeking funding, but at the same time, there is an entire layer below there where it is that she's competing in New York, she's competing in those regional tournaments in the tri-state area without really a support system of the federation, you know. So it's a little bit of my story where there's this piece where she needs to kind of bridge the gap herself, unfortunately or fortunately enough. But I would say that is the reality of every federation, you know. And I'm now going into another one, which is judo, where I have my training partner for the Olympics in 2016. He was trying to get to the Olympics in 2020 or 2021, and again, there'll be stories of him working full-time while training full-time until he had a breakthrough performance at the Pan Am Games. He won a bronze medal at the Pan Am Games, and then he became the #1 for USA Judo, and then he received a stipend. You know, so there's almost, I think that we have this impression that it's not that way in different federations or different organizations, and different sporting bodies obviously have better administration. So the ones who perform the best have the best administration, best identification of talents, etc. But the reality is, as an amateur athlete, I would dare say that 90% of us, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, we have the exact same experience, you know, because in the end, we are amateur sportsmen. A lot of these sports do not specifically derive profit, and a lot of it is funded through government intervention, sometimes private sponsorship. But unfortunately, in Trinidad and Tobago, we don't have this body for injection of private capital into sport, or there's no it doesn't seem like they have this motivation or benefit for some of these organizations. So until we have that, which is a you know, it's more of a macro scale transformation. I do think that individuals have to be educated in what different organizations can do, and then also recognize that sometimes it is that we need to perform to get to the next stage. So
essentially, it's the grind then.
It's the grind.
Because what I noticed was that you understood the science of the entire triangle, that structure,
yes,
that pyramid, and you grind. You work on the different aspects of it.
Yes.
Because in everything in the Caribbean, in anywhere in the world you go, that is one key thing you have to understand: the organizational structure, and know what you want to achieve that goal.
Yes. I have a similar story too, where I remember I did get onto government funding, but I didn't have a 2015 that I performed as well as in 2014. So I'd gotten a certain amount of stipend from the government, and I found myself in Paris in 2016, not knowing how I was going to get to the Pan Am Senior Championships in Cuba, and I needed to go back to New York, up to Toronto for a training camp, down to South America, either Chile or Argentina, and then back to New York, and then back to Cuba. And I remember the same circumstance that you told me, where it is that your grandfather maybe have stepped in and kind of gave you a little bump so you can make it to the Olympics. My dad needed to step in. This is me being a Central American championship bronze medalist, coming top 5 in the region and Pan Am seniors, right? And still, the 3 or 4 months before the Olympics, seeking some sort of assistance. All the documentation had been put in for funding, etc. And unfortunately, you know, I can't give you an easy answer of, because it is, Keisha, it is meritorious that your daughter has made a team, you know, but it's almost as in the momentum that you would need to get to a certain point where now it is that the money's coming in, you know, like for example, like a Dylan Carter, you know, where it's almost, you have to be top 10 in the world, you have to be #1.
Yeah, that process frustrates the parents initially, and then only if the parents really have the capital or the drive then they can really continue with the child's passion.
Yes.
It makes no economic sense. A parent who, just for want of saying, my child has been at the Olympics, to now live in poverty because you are sacrificing on the one hand for a nation to then say she is Trinidadian or he is Trinidadian, but there is nothing to, because for the child to train, is the parents have to pay. For the child to be dressed in the right equipment, is the parents have to purchase. And these things are neither cheap nor available in Trinidad. It's not produced here, so you have to bring it in. And it comes at a cost at every level. And if there is a means or your ability to knock on the door, because I have been exposed to enough swimming equipment to know that what we have in Trinidad or possibly in the Caribbean is of really sad, poor quality. And that what we are doing to the Trinidadian swimmers, unless they get outside, they are going to be injured continuously or suffering from injuries that they cannot come back from. And it is an unfair case because when they are injured, unless they start to work, once again it's the parents having to go by a therapist to deal with it. So I want to, is it economical to have a child continue to swim from the age of 13 to 18 in Trinidad, and the likelihood of getting onto the international stage is possibly 0.01%, or waiting for her to leave him or her, the child to leave Trinidad, possibly having they will still have the skill and the mental capacity to record and get themselves outside and then try to come back. Because I find it really, really hard to extend that sort of money and not reach anywhere in particular.
It's more than economics though.
No, but here's it, right? We have possibly, you have a country of 1.3 million with possibly 3 named persons as Olympians, or 3 persons who people in the world can identify as swimmers. And that's quite unfortunate because every year you have more than 100 young people coming to learn to swim and developing proper swimming techniques and competing. You do not go to a swim meet and meet 10 people competing. You need possibly about 200 persons competing. Why is it that we are only turning out 1 or 2 persons and at that level?
So allow me to answer because I'm watching on the time as well too. So I mean, I've heard what Chris has said, very valid questions and so on. Some of our previous guests, we had the Secretary General of the TPOC here, Annette Knott. We also had a former Olympian, Shanta McLean. And the recurring theme is not just parents assisting, but until, like Chris mentioned, we get to the point where certain first world countries have the support for the up and coming. You know, in Canada, for example, there's a carding system that from the top 10 under, the top 10, 12 and under get funding. We have to, unfortunately, until we get to that point, and this is all part of the awareness community. You know, we have to revert back to the ages of when I was a young swimmer and a young athlete, barbecues, fundraisers. Mrs. Knott spoke about cleaning the chicken and doing barbecues, but a lot of parents do not have the wherewithal to be financing their young athletes. You know, it's very expensive. Even when you get elite athlete funding, it's only $250,000 a year, TT. You know, I used to spend that in 4 months of competitions. So luckily I had sponsors, Angostura and so on, sponsoring me and Speedo, but we're going to have to revert and keep plugging for the national governing bodies, keep plugging for the ministry, keep plugging for sport company. But until that point in time, we can't rely on the parents. It has to be the time and effort of the volunteers, of the community. Chantal spoke about her entire community and more about coming together, having cooler parties, having fundraisers, having barbecues. And that is what has to happen. Keyshawn Walcott spoke about, Toko growing up in the community. That is what we're at now, but it doesn't mean that that is the best solution. It has to continue. but in terms of the awareness has to come out there. We have to have published audited financial statements as part of the service level agreements between sport company and the NGOs. I'm a former chairman of sport companies, so I've seen it at the highest level. I've had all the NGOs reporting to me in Trinidad and Tobago. Like Chris mentioned, football, cricket, the more popular sports, they get a bit more funding, a bit more organization. Sports like swimming, water polo aren't there yet, but that's why it's important that sessions like this happen, word get out there, and people like yourself volunteer, just like Chris is doing right now in gymnastics. And it's not going to be easy, but you volunteer, you ask the questions, you run for positions on the committees, and you ask the hard questions, and you do it for the love of the sport, not for the love of your child, not for the love of we have to move away from people doing it for their children's benefit. Chris has nobody in gymnastics, he's the president. So that's where we have to go, people who are doing it for the love of the sport and for the betterment of everybody.
Yeah.
So,
and let me just add to this, right? You kind of talk about it, and the one experience I had. So I asked my dad, and I had 144 donors to my Olympic journey. That's 144 people paying between $5 to TGOC giving me thousands of US to attend certain things. This would be government, but 144 people assisted me. But I needed to ask for that. I had a crowdfunding campaign, and I held it 2 or 3 times during the 2-year time period. So again, you talk about economic benefit. The idea is that life is tough, and life is not an economically prosperous thing unless it is that we make it so. And that is the point of how do I get that turnover. There may be a 10-year time period where it is I'm only investing into it, and then everyone kind of sees. I'm going to call out Dylan on this, but Dylan went in and he had a magnificent FINA World FINA Championships, and I think he got a check for an additional more than 100,000 USD. But the question you have to ask is, how much money did it cost his dad? I know his dad, and I remember years ago his dad coming to training, sending him to tournaments, etc. He went to USC, and now it is you see him at 26 or 27. You're like, okay, well, how do I get to Dylan? It is the 16 years in between, and maybe one event is going to create that economic benefit inside there. But how could you get there but for this sacrifice, but for the 144 donors, but for cleaning the chicken? That's how it is you get there. So you ask how economically viable it is. That's how you make it economically viable. But the economic viability of your sport journey is not the point of sport. It is for developing the character of an individual that you could get through tougher situations in life. Because me getting to the Olympics, I thought it was tough. It was not. I had surgery after the Olympics. I had to start a new career after the Olympics, and all those things, I'm using skills that I got through sport, not stopping inside of the pool, not stopping when it is that I was in France and didn't know how I was getting to Cuba. And that's the point. That's the mental fortitude that you need, and that's what I think is the ultimate benefit of sport, and that's why it is I give for sport, because I want other individuals to be able to have that type of mental fortitude, especially as Trinidadians, because Trinidad and Tobago is my, I love my country.
So my next question, just to answer one of your questions, you mentioned judo a few times, so you transitioned from water polo to judo. So we had a question from the audience: do I continue to invest in my child who may not make it to the Olympics, or who may not reach that level, or they may, but you recognize at an early age, hey, swimming, I'm not going to make it.
Yes.
Water polo, I think I'm going to make it. Team sport, maybe we're not there yet. So how did you, or why did you transition to judo? And talk a bit about that, because that's very interesting. That you've gone through 3 sports to achieve your ultimate goal. So I'm not saying that maybe kids are in the wrong sport or whatnot, but that and water polo is completely different. To judo.
Yes,
so
it is.
Tell me, about that.
So there was a frustration. I understand the frustration. So 2010 Central American Championships, we qualified for Pan Am Games. Pan Am Games is the Olympic qualifier for water polo. Now again, we may not have had a great chance, but we would have been on stage to qualify for the Olympics in 2012. Trinidad and Tobago did not send us. We did not get the funding. We did not get the approval to go. And it was heart-wrenching after, going to the World Developmental Championships in 2009, winning a bronze medal, 2010 qualifying through Central American Championships, going to Saudi Arabia, another World Developmental Championship in 2011. And 2 or 3 months before Pan Am Games, they said, we don't think you have a chance to make it to the Olympics. We're not funding you. You're not going. That's where it is I was. I got disheartened, and I remember looking at the Olympics in 2012, which one of my best friends, George, was going to, cheering him on, and me thinking, Christopher, you wanted to be an Olympian since 7 or 8 years old. It's like, you're going to make it to the Olympics, right? So I had done martial arts as an adult, and I had actually not started judo yet. So I started judo in 2012, after the Olympic Games, and I remember winning the first national championships in 2012. And my Cuban coach, Jesus Chavez, in his broken English to me, is like, oh, you boy, you good, And I'm thinking, all right. I went to ask my coach, Mark Litrian, Sensei, how do you make it to the Olympics? He told me, Chris, no one else has ever made it to the Olympics in the sport of judo, right? And maybe you're a white belt right now, maybe in 2020. Luckily, I didn't wait until then, because, 2020 never happened, right? And I was like, no, I'm going to make it to the Olympics. And life kind of aligned itself around this goal, and everything conspired for this thing to happen. So when I look back at every single failure, it was an opportunity for me to transition into something else. And again, 2012 to 2016 was me funding myself, save for until 2015. I had to go through these years until I got, it was 3 years of me funding myself. So when I went to Scotland, it was on me. I was working as an engineer in Scotland, and me traveling to the UK was because I was there based on all the work that my parents had put in for me to get educated. And then I made the decision for myself in 2015, I'm going to quit my job, because I quit my job, and go for a year and a half to try making it to the Olympic Games, right? And I didn't make it to the Olympic Games until 6 weeks or 7 weeks before the Olympics. It was in May of 2016. And if I had lost one of the matches, all that sacrifice would have been for naught, right? So for me, it's kind of like eventually a person is going to have to make the decision for themselves of like what it means for them to be that particular thing. Understanding that experience is going to fortify us in every experience that we have after. Now that I'm doing things professionally, I'm an attorney also. It's like, being an attorney is a grind. It's like, you winning law school or whatever law school you go to is not the hard part. It's the years after. So that's I think what is that's what sport is. That's why it is that my mom got me into swimming at age 5 or 6, and I feel that it's only been positive, even though it's been not economically viable at all, right? But I do think at the end. Huh? No, but that's okay. That's okay. The person that you derive out of these challenging times is a person who's more valuable at the end. Is a person who may, when your daughter has children, she will have the ability to say, well, yes, and that's how it is that you derive the economic benefit, by deriving a person of quality, of value, so that now it is that Sebastian talks about him being at the National Sport Company. I'm at the Gymnastics Federation. I'm a volunteer. It's like I don't get paid for this, So all those things are valuable contributions. Because if I look at my hourly rate as an attorney, working how much of it, 10, 15 hours for gymnastics, it's not, there's no way that it is that you can recoup that when you look at it as an economic thing. But my goal is, if gymnastics now in 2024 has an Olympian, that's my contribution, whatever it is. And they may not be seeing the economic contributors, but every volunteer, every person that besides as an ex-athlete or as a parent or as a person who loves a sport, giving back to that particular sport. That's how it is that we, at least right now in Trinidad and Tobago, create this bubble. Because I think that even if it is, you look at sport and you're like, all right, they should give me $100,000 return. There's still millions of dollars of all the volunteers who are working for this that you cannot pay for, and that's how it is that we fill the gap.
So tell me something, Chris. So you spoke about all the challenges that sport has given you, and I think you talk about the lessons sport has taught you. So I want to just talk a bit about your professional changes and challenges in life, because again, engineer to attorney, it's very different.
Yes.
So you spoke about a lot of challenges, quitting your job. You changed career completely. Tell me how your sporting experience and lessons learned have enabled you now to move from one career, which you went to school for 4 years, and I mean you practiced it for years afterwards at major multinational companies, to go back into school, to go back into the grind again. How did sport assist you with that transition, and why did you do that transition? Because a lot of people out there in jobs that they may not like.
Yes.
They may be grinding a job they don't want. It's important for them to hear that you don't have to stick with that job or that career. You have one life to live. You made a decision to change not just your sports, but your professional career, which you may do for the next 40, 50 years.
Yes.
Talk a bit about that.
So I think the biggest thing for me with that is what I've kind of learned along the journey, right, is one, the amor fati, which is the love of faith, and then also this aspect that I have one life to live, right? So it is about fulfillment for me, and that is the value. How is it that I instill myself with certain types of skills to better be able to positively impact individuals in this life? And that is what this transition has meant for me, because I remember working for a certain multinational company in Trinidad and not being fulfilled specifically, even though I liked being an engineer, right? So I still think that I do engineering now. I solve problems, but just in a different capacity, legal ones. But how do I impact as many people as I can? And I do believe that where I am, even though still it's not as economically profitable as where I would have been as an engineer working for a big oil and gas company, I feel more fulfilled in that space, and I recognize that the constant connection of all the things that I'm doing is about fulfillment. And that's what I would say to any young athletes. In the end, it is that we must be proud of the opportunities which we have sought, the journey that we've gone on, and not just say, what if? It would have been absolutely, I remember having this conversation with George back in maybe 2012, 2013, and I did not want to be the person that they said, well, Chris, you were extremely good in every sport that you did, and you could have been an Olympian. That was actually the major turning point for me. It's like, I didn't want to be the person that could have. I wanted to be the person that did everything that I could, even if I failed, to achieve what it is I wanted to do. And that's helped me in my transition into another profession, which is another grind. And I've recognized that life in general is hard. And what we do in one faculty is kind of mirroring in other ones. So if it is that we are still this, particularly as young person, to say, well, yeah, I can kind of give up. This is okay. I'll be fortuitous in the next opportunity. I think that is instilling in us, practices, behaviors that are not good. Moving on,
Very, very valid. Questions for Michael?
Yeah. Hi, Chris. Michael Nyako, coach with TMT Aquatics. Value. For me, and my experience with meeting people from all walks of life is value. Economics is one small part of value. Being a positive influence on society and on people who may be disadvantaged. I think that is, nationally, that's what we need here. Like I said, I have met young people who are not as fortunate to have money or education, who haven't been out of their neighborhood, right? You know, who haven't seen North Coast Road, right? Much less have experiences of going to university, having an opportunity to have change careers, living in Scotland, travel, and create greatness, right? So this value in terms of economics, and part of creating that, building that valuable person is, you know, generating economic benefits yourself, right? So I think that's where, I think that for me, the value great people like you, Chris, and Sebastian, and our past guests here, especially what's her name? Chantal McLean. Great story, is to show others here that it is achievable, and I mean it takes some grit, some work, right? But there are some people here, especially young men, young poor men in Trinidad that I've met, who have no idea that people like you all exist, who have no idea that greatness exists, a great human experience exists, you know, and I'm glad that we are, you know, we are able to facilitate trying to expose, you know, this to more people. So, you know.
So very valid point, Mike, which kind of leads me to my next question for Chris, and I'm watching time, so we're going to have to keep a little quick awareness again. So, but Chris, you know, let's talk about you giving back, you know, because I think you've touched on it in your conversation. Very happy that you could be our guest today. But I want to know, you know, how are you giving back now, and what ideas or solutions do you have for the challenges that we have in Trinidad to solve, like the what Michael is bringing up, you know, the young people out there who are disillusioned, who are on the streets, you know, the gangs, like what part are you playing, and more importantly, what part can we all play, and what can we do differently to help solve a lot of the challenges to really positively influence people's lives, especially the young people who are our future?
Yeah, so how are we giving back? So I try, it's not really a strategy per se, but it's really listening to places where I think that my skill set or my experience can be utilized. So, you know, I was talking about the organization before that was affiliated with Queen's Royal College. So I joined charitable organizations which I feel perspectives align to my own, and I get into communities where other like-minded people are willing to give back. And I think that creates a synergy and a momentum in how it is that we're able to give back. So that's one faculty. The other aspect which I felt I needed to do was my friend, she's also a therapist for the Olympic team, Nicole Fuentes. That's how it is I actually got involved in gymnastics. She called me up in 2020 and she said, Christopher, gymnastics has a lot of different issues, but they just need someone that loves sports, may not have ever done gymnastics before, but is just willing to listen, to understand, and to try doing the best that they possibly can with a keen interest in producing the best result for gymnastics. I feel that I have only scraped the surface of assisting gymnastics, but I do hope that over this next year, and if I continue in the administration, I'm able to create a structure which is able to propel athletes to achieve the goals that they actually want. And I recognize that every federation needs individuals who are willing to do that particular thing. You know, you talk about in sport company, there are many different federations, you know, more than 30, that all have this need for administration, and that's how it is I have kind of focused myself in sport, right, in charity, about giving back. So because I've benefited tremendously from every single volunteer, from the Amateur Swimming Association to the Water Polo Association to Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee to Ministry of Sport, who have worked arduously to give me the opportunities that I've had. And I now feel that I must refocus myself while keeping myself strong, of giving back to these persons as best as I possibly can, using my mind, using my time, using my ability, and that's how it is I have found.
Very, very valid point, you know, and I'm glad we spoke about economy. It's not about making money, it's about putting the right people who have the right intentions in the right places for the benefit of others, you know. One more question from the audience, and I'll let...
Okay, I mean, so again, I commend you because I know your time is very limited and everything else you do to volunteer actually for gymnastics and actually not associated with gymnastics, per se, like having a kid involved. So my question comes back to you mentioned helping this young lady in New York, right? Sebastian talked about carded athletes, where we have them away. Do you see a future of that in Trinidad among athletes where, you know, there's some formalized process? Well, at least athletes and parents know that if I qualify for this and this and this, and maybe there's an avenue for funding. Where it says, oh, let me talk to this person, I talk to that person, they might like me, they might like me, there's a little side group out here. So, I mean, is there something that gymnastics will be doing to say, okay, if you qualify for this competition, if you do this, and can that be transferred to other sports, like, you know, in swimming, you qualify for this, you know. Is that something you,
So I'll be sure with the answer. So the answer is yes. So just maybe 3 weeks ago, the sport company has initiated a developmental program, which we have, we as the Trinidad and Tobago Gymnastics Federation has contributed to, where we're trying to access particular funds allocated by the government for development. And this is below the elite athlete standard. So it would be identifying young ladies, young men, young boys and girls, and in the sport of gymnastics, then spearheading it by, at the community level, training coaches, and then having specific programs where people are exposed to gymnastics. So that is actually something where we have a plan to do it. The government has, I suppose, a focus. They've gone and given an initiative. It's just that sometimes the bureaucracies, it doesn't come full circle. But there is a plan to do it. So I would say,
but it's objective.
This is the objective piece. So I remember being frustrated before of like, what is everyone doing? And it's only when it is that I remember. So I'm gonna plug it here. Sarah Lambert, who runs a school down south in gymnastics, she has done tremendous work. I didn't realize how much stuff was done with an operational plan, developmental plan for gymnastics, where they have highlighted the exact cost of being able to fund a coach to operate certain facilities. You know, because we have the equipment. Like, so the thing is that in Woodbrook Youth Facility, we have equipment where if we had a person and it was able to be funded, could go and coach 100 young boys and girls every single Saturday. And the circumstances are, do we have a person who's willing to not be paid the exact economic work or volunteer? And also we have that injection of money from the government. You know, so we are working as an organization. It's just that the alignment and the dispensation of monies is not particularly.
I'm also looking for the athlete themselves. Like, the person who qualifies for CISC and regional.
Yeah. So
I mean, like, do they know a formalized plan or something in writing? This is what I have in my head, your head, because I like you, or I don't like you. Yeah. So that's my point. Question.
There is one at the federation level, at least because it's the first federation that I've operated in,
yeah.
And there is one at the federation level. It's just about, do we have, because again, even if it is the federation wants to have these 50 coaches throughout Trinidad and Tobago, there is an economic component, even if it is that people are willing to volunteer. You'd still have to pay for the setting up the facilities, you still have to pay for renting of equipment, you still have to pay for these things. Even if someone went in and took the lion's share out of the economic drive out of it, it's like, oh, okay, I'm willing to give, you know, my time to do this particular thing on Saturday, and that's obviously a problem. So I know, Chris, you wanted to. ask a question?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
Yes.
So, Christopher, you have had a very colorful sporting life. Tell me, I would like to know, as you would have transitioned from swimming to water polo to judo, and when you have gone through all your many competitions, what were some of your mantras? What are some of your guiding principles? What kept you going?
So my favorite poem is Invictus, and I know it by heart, so I wouldn't recite it entirely, but out of the night that covers me, black as a pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. So like Invictus, this If by Rudyard Kipling, again a poem that I know. And everyone has, I remember that there was a Rage Against the Machine song and a Metallica song that we used to play all the time, like George, back in '96, you know. And so some of those things are practices with self-actualization, visualization that we learned through different people. So I talked about Edward Tuberoso. He used to do this visualization exercise with us. So it's coaches, you know, kind of teaching you that. You speak about books that I would have read. So one of the books that I really love is Ryan Holiday, Obstacle is the Way. It talks about Stoic wisdom and the love of faith. So I said the words before, amor fati. And when it is that anytime that I'm downtrodden and challenged, what it is I actually do is I kind of go about and say, it's like you must not only bear what is necessary, but love it. So that's the amor fati, where, okay, this is where it is that I am. How do I create something positive out of this that is meaningful in my life, even if it is a negative experience? So, you know, those are a couple of the things. And then another book that I think is a little bit tough, but it is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, right? So, and you can read like a line a day, and there is this like profound wisdom that I feel get. So those are the couple books, couple poems that I love, that I've recited, that I think will help individuals. And then when it is your challenge, you know, I remember, and this is the best example, because I used to be really scared I used to be a 50-meter flyer, and I remember I used to get so scared when I was like 8 or 9 of getting beaten. And this guy, I remember getting beaten for the first time at 50-meter fly by Ryan Yearwood, so hail out to him, you know. But after that, you need to overcome the fear. And I remember having this visualization at the blocks, and it's some of the best things, where the timekeepers telling you, ask to mark us, or, you know, take your marks, and you just take that deep breath, and you need to get over that fear while it is that you're diving into the water, and just focusing on what you need to do for that race. And those are the things that you learn as a skill that I still use when I'm going into the courtroom every single day. You know, and you know, I was in court on Thursday. I was like, I'm diving into the water. This is where I need to be. So that's a little bit of my mantra.
Great. One more question for the audience.
It's not a question, but I know this may be a new series for our club, but I don't know in your other roles if there's ever been any program like going to the schools and things like that.
So one of these things, and I have been a little bit foolhardy with this, but I have this aspiration in gymnastics. My mom has actually pushed me, where Michelle Franklin from Tots and Tumblers, I've promised her for the last few months that I would go in and talk to these young girls. You know, they're around 7 or 8 years old, and again, gymnastics is a very interesting sport for me, because, for example, in swimming, you peak at 25, 26. In gymnastics, you're peaking at 13 to 16 years old. So it's a much different space. So for me, my plan is to spend time like this and just visit random clubs. You know, sometimes I used to coach judo at Queen's Royal College, you know, and that's another piece. So I feel a lot of these mentorship opportunities are situational. So I now sometimes shadow, and I'm training with the national water polo team, you know, when it is I get time. And there are these young guys who are all 18 and 19 years old now starting their quest for finishing off university, being serious athletes for Trinidad and Tobago. And when it is that you're inside there in the pool, you get these short opportunities, these 5 minutes where someone's saying, I remember Kelvin, he told me, he's like, Chris, I'm real frustrated. He's now 19, finished up Queen's Royal College. He's going to school in Houston, and he doesn't know how he's going to manage this water polo thing, and he wants to be on the national team. So he's supposed to go up in December. And it's these short words where, Kelvin, you know, I'm going to find you a club. And I played in the Pops water polo when I was in Houston. Fun. Go and check this club. Check Johnny Littlepage, who just finished an Ironman, was one of the athletes who beat. Johnny used to play there when it is that he was living in Houston, working as an engineer. You know, so it's about, a lot of it is really these personal connections and the young persons having the ability to have conversations with us, because for me, it's not like being an athlete is not like an end thing. It's not like you go to the Olympics and then everything stops. You know, it is, you go to the Olympics and then what is it that you do after? It doesn't matter if you win 2 gold. You talk about Richard. You know, Richard has a transition to make right now, and I'm seeing him transition, and it's how is it that we do these things gracefully, and it's relying on guys like Sebastian who transitioned from being an Olympian, you know, helped out George. George is now transitioning, you know, years after from being an Olympian, helped out Dylan, and then the next step is how Dylan helps Nikolai Blackman, you know, to be a great athlete, because now Nikolai is going to the University of Tennessee, you know. So that's now, after Nico will now have to talk to younger athletes. How do you get to university? And after he gets from university, how do I become a professional student if he wants to do that? How do I become a person that contributes to society? How do I then use my skill set to become, you know, economically viable, get this job that I want? Because all of us, you know, time waits for no one. So that's my feeling on that.
I'd be very happy to hear after that we are at TNT Aquatics going to be doing on a school tour, and Chris has been so interesting. We probably might bring it back again, but we are going to be reaching out, and the next series, which we may be doing early January, will be at a school. We're going to choose different schools, and not just prestige schools. We're going to go to all the schools, serve all, you name it. We want to keep building the awareness, not just on YouTube and Instagram, but get the messages out there. And if we can change one person for the better, I think we would have succeeded. So, parting words, Chris, before we close off. We could go on for hours, but parting words before we close off. So
not just your Fatima boy, right?
Fatima boy.
Not just Fatima and QRT. Okay, cool. Parting words. I mean, I hope that what I said today assists someone. I want to say as a parting word that you can Google me, and I do have my phone number online. Please don't, you know, but if you WhatsApp me and you need to have a conversation as a young athlete, I am open to anyone having a, you know, coming in and sitting down in my office and just seeking some sort of wisdom. Obviously, I can't give you hours and hours and hours, but if it is that you're having a difficult situation, I can give you some reflection and also tell you that in the end, everything kind of works out. As long as you persevere in whatever it is that you do, it doesn't matter how much you struggle in a particular circumstance. So that's my parting words. You can reach out to me. I'm sure that you can reach out to everyone. I know that George, if it is you message him online or something, he will have a long conversation with you. He will give you a book. George's book is The Pathway to the Superior Man, and he would kind of pass that to me. It's like, oh, Chris, you should read this. You know, so there's always like these people, and again, every journey that you have is a personal one. No one can walk that path for you. So in the end, you're always gonna have to go and give 99% of the effort, but that 1% is what makes a difference to make you whole. And you have, you know, individuals who are willing to help you. So that's my parting words.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chris. It's a pleasure having you. Thank you.